Welcome back, everyone, to a brand new TV show spoiler review here at Max Talks Movies. My name is Max Dinnenberg. Today, I'm giving my spoiler review, of season three, episode two of the HBO show Euphoria, which debuted on Sunday night, called America My Dreams. This is a full spoiler review, guys. I'm Max Dinnenberg here at Max Talks Movies. So if you have not checked out Sunday night's episode of Euphoria, please go back, watch the episode, then come here because this is going to be a full spoiler talk. Going to be talking about breaking down the episode, giving my thoughts spoiler wise. So go check out the episode, then come back here. So, I again, if you're new to the channel, I'll do this probably this will be the last time I'll intro a Euphoria episode. This breakdown is again going to season three. This is one of my favorite shows of all time. And especially those first two seasons are really perfect in my opinion. Two of the best seasons of television you'll probably see. And I was been dying for a season three of Euphoria, and I felt very mixed about last week's premiere episode. I thought it was okay. I was a mixed bag, but I leaned more positive than negative on Euphoria. And I did think that this episode was definitely an improvement. Like I definitely thought this was a stronger episode than episode one. But I didn't think this was like a phenomenal episode that made me feel like we're in peak euphoria, you know? Um, this episode, we started out with Maddie, who we learned about her situation, her becoming an assistant. That really baller scene in the restaurant, how she got her job was really cool. And then we saw that, being an assistant really wasn't making her a lot of money. Her mother was losing her job due to COVID. Um, and we learned that she, on the side, was managing this content creators, doing something very similar to what Cassie is doing here on the show. And she was making some serious money, but then the assistant found out and she had to get rid of that, which was a really more stable income and a lot more money than she was making an assistant. She's doing a side hustle, which I really do think has become a much bigger deal post-COVID with a lot of people who have a main job and then doing other side hustles. You see a lot of, like, for example, like in sports, like broadcasters, they have their own podcast as well. Like everyone does like a side hustle now. Really felt like that became a thing during the pandemic when everyone was stuck doing nothing and had to do multiple different things to get through days. So I thought they did it. I think the reason why I thought this was a better episode was I think Maddie was the perfect character to focus on because, and I stand by this, she does feel like the one character who does feel like a genuine human being in this season. I'm not talking about seasons one and two because I think it felt like a very real stuff that happened in seasons one and two. They have definitely gone off the rails with a couple of these plot points in this season that don't feel as grounded or as realistic. I did think they did a really good job grounding Maddie's character in our climate over the last 6 years, dealing with COVID, what to do in that situation, wanting to do more, and learning how she had to give up that managerial role for that girl, and she turned out to be a massive OnlyFans star who, in that scene said she was making, $700,000 and anyone can do it. And that led to Cassie reaching out to her in this episode. I think we can keep focused on that. We'll get to Rue in a second. So Cassie does this meetup with Maddie. Before this, we actually see Maddie and Rue interacting. That is definitely a twosome that we really rarely got to see together in Euphoria. Obviously, we know Maddie was usually with Kat. And Cassie, for the most part, she had a really sweet scene Maddie did last season with Jules in season two at the bowling alley. So it's always cool when you, even with a big ensemble like this, to still get these intimate, first time kind of, or feels like fresh enough dynamics. And that was Maddie and Rue. And obviously, Rue was talking about her thinking about high school and reflecting about high school and Jules and all of that. And it was that this felt like a very vintage Euphoria scene where, Maddie's feels like she's not dressing up for a professional meeting. She's clearly trying to show off to someone. And Rue's like, who the hell are you meeting with that is this professional? And she does the this and the crying, and she says Cassie. And when Rue went ding ding round two, and that was very vintage Euphoria, which I thought was great. And I thought the scene between Maddie and Cassie was fantastic, where um, Maddie is going to be using Cassie in this situation. Maddie realizes in this conversation that Cassie is still as dumb and arrogant as she was in high school. And I think Maddie is going to, obviously, she's now invited to the wedding. She's going to be managing Cassie now. I think the big cluster that's going to happen at this wedding for Cassie and Nate is, Maddie. being there. I think she's gonna do something at the wedding that makes it not a memorable wedding for Cassie and Nate. Very fascinated. I think everything with Maddie in this episode was phenomenal. She was the MVP of this episode. So we saw Cassie posing for some more OnlyFans stuff. She had the baseball one. She had the weird like baby diaper one. She had yeah, so just some weird ones here. I did think it was a nice scene with her and the housemaid who was also taking pictures for her. And Kat said, "Do you anything want more out of this life?" And she's like, "America was the dream. I'm living the dream." I thought that was actually a really nice dynamic as well. But Cassie starts talking to one of Nate's, friends' wives, and Nate and her have this big confrontation where, Nate's find out that she was posing with all this stuff. And Nate was not this. I think a lot of people aren't in love with Nate this season because Nate was really the big bad of the first two seasons. And even though Nate's not like a good person in this season, I think a lot of people are Team Nate as it pertains to this dynamic with Cassie. And I don't think people, I guess, like rooting for Nate or like agreeing with Nate on things. I thought it was a really cool and funny scene where when Nate got that picture and deleted it, he was like, I'm relieved. Are you relieved? And the both of them, when they go like psycho against each other, it is quite an acting masterclass from Sweeney and Elordi. Um, and it was even again another like top Euphoria moment when you have like Cassie and Nate talking. And Nate goes, my Maddie you were talking to, and she's like, well, it's my Maddie. And then Nate's like, my ex-girlfriend. She's like, my best friend. Like, very really funny stuff. But obviously, Nate believes that her OnlyFans career is about to be over. It's obviously not going to be over. So we'll see how that goes. We also had the return of Eric Dane as Cal Jacobs in this episode. Again, he did film this while he was battling ALS shortly before his death earlier this year, sadly. And you can definitely tell he's slurring some words, but it was a really beautiful just to see him back on screen. And it's tough not to feel emotional or have chills or have the feels seeing him back on screen, especially in the manner that he is now, where he was when he filmed this season. But the back and forth when he was describing, when Nate's trying to ask, like, you were gay, and the back and forth of that with Nate and Cal, I thought was, and the maid listening in, I thought that was really well done. So it was really beautiful to see Eric Dane back on the big screen, or I guess on the small screen here with Euphoria. But Rue, of course, dominates the majority of this episode, working for Alamo now at the strip club. She begins to get that relationship with Angel, played by Priscilla Delgado, who's one of the strippers at the club, who's been worried that the girl who OD'd at the party in episode one is, something happened to her, obviously, and she's not too happy about it. And Rue lets her know that that's what happened. But Rue believes that Alamo is going to be sending her to an actual rehab clinic, but it does not look like that was the case. They walked in, they checked her in, there was no credentials, there was no sign-in paper. I clearly believe they're insinuating that we're never going to see this character ever again. Like she's being put away to be like killed off or something. We'll see if Rue realizes this in the episode. But I think the other part, I'll get to some of my negatives, and there are some negatives. The thing that I liked was I talked about the relatability of Maddie dealing with COVID, dealing with doing all these side hustles. Another thing they've done, I think, a good job at, not great, but like good enough job so far. I hope we get that from the other characters, is the idea of reflecting on high school. I think there's a lot of people out there who, when they get past high school, some people miss it, want to be back in high school. Some people say that was one of the worst times of their life, or it was such a mess, or they feel like they're a better person post high school, so they don't really reflect too much on high school. This show's done a pretty smart job of that, where you can tell Cassie liked being the person, one of the most famous people in her little bubble in high school. And now she's gone on and she's struggling to have that same fame as an adult. Rue, I think, misses high school because I think that was the most fun, technically, of being with Jules, even though it wasn't good for her. She wasn't being used for drugs, or she was taking drugs, but she was on a correct path at the point, and she was not being used in drug trafficking and working for crime bosses and things of that nature. And I like the idea that Maddie doesn't miss high school at all. It was such a train wreck for her. She feels like she's doing a better job post. I like that because I've obviously had a lot of friends in high school. Some of us still talk to each other. Some of us have never talked to each other since graduating high school 6 years ago. It happens. Some of us, like I sometimes miss high school. I know some of my other friends don't love talking about high school. They just love talking about stuff now. It happens. I do like that there's a realization of some characters are very fond. They miss high school. Some are not. Rue's making some serious money, but the ending scene here of this episode was Rue meeting up with Jules again. Jules with her sugar daddy, as they've been saying, living in this penthouse, getting paid just to sleep with this guy who's married. And Rue, I didn't look like Jules knew that Rue knew that. And Rue kept insinuating that she wants another shot with Jules, even though, she kept saying it was not good for us in high school. And right as Jules was about to get ready for a bath, Rue was like, all right, I'm gonna head out of here. Thanks. She tried, and then Jules did say, I thought you were gonna stay and keep me company. I was like, uh-oh. So maybe we're setting up Rue and Jules. They were again not good for each other in this show. Not at all in seasons one and two. I think they ended on a really nice note in season two where you could kind of tell that there was some closure there. So I am nervous they're just going to redo Rue and Jules again. So here are my issues though, guys, with the episode. I just don't get the vision that Levinson has for Los Angeles as the Wild West. Again, I lived in Los Angeles for a decade. I haven't been there like 2.5 years, but again, I lived there from 2013 till 2023, so I know a lot about Los Angeles, especially during the COVID pandemic, which is a lot about what the show is talking about. I will say I understand the idea that as someone who now lives in Philadelphia, but I've lived in Philadelphia for over half my life, and I've lived in LA for a little more than half my life. I There's vast differences. In LA, I would say was more freeing. You could definitely see a lot of different genders, ethnicities, cultures, more in the public eye without disdain, I would say, I guess is the right way to put it in LA. Um, people were accepted, I guess, more, at least in my perspective, going to private school. And I went to a school where there's different genders, different ethnicities, different cultures at this way. It wasn't just like all white people, for example. I was like very small, actually, ethnicity group in my classes from 6th to 12th grade. So I understand the idea of LA being this very different place, freeing for a lot of people. I just don't get like Hollywood of LA feeling like the Wild West. The way the show is shot, it's not for me this season. I know the show needs to evolve, feel different from high school, not those purple, pink colors that were in the first two seasons. But the idea of LA being the Wild West and the way the show is like shot, feeling like it, and we're driving through like Hollywood Boulevard, it doesn't fit, in my opinion, at all. And I think it's a big negative for the show. Like Nate's and Cassie's house is ridiculous, so over the top in my opinion, especially when Nate's struggling to make up any money and they're living in this feels like 19th like a fancy Wild West house. I'm like, this is a bit ridiculous for me. The other part is the show is trying to make this statement about Gen Z that they are just cool selling whatever they need to get ahead. But I don't love that they're making like this is like Gen Z created the idea of selling things, selling whatever they need to do in their life to make money. Like that's been a thing throughout every generation. Now, yes, every generation has something differently to sell to get ahead. Obviously, as a part of Gen Z, the same age as a lot of people on the show. Sure, yes, we're in an age of social media. People feel like they need to sell their bodies, their face, their images, whatever they need to sell. But I feel like it's very lazy, I would say. They could do a better job expanding, everything's financial, I guess, in the show. You have the strip club, you have OnlyFans, you have being an agent, you have being, I guess, the sugar daddy, as they say, with Jules. You have being an assistant like Lexi. It's all about financial things to get ahead. And I totally get that. I just think there could be more realistic, because sometimes the show this season, more than the first two, does feel too unbelievable and unrealistic, I would say. And I think the problem with that is everyone feels like they're on a different show sometimes. Like Rue, her story feels like she's on a different show than the stuff with Cassie, Maddie, and Nate. They feel like they're on a totally different show. And again, that's another problem for the show, as I'm going to continue to say. I'm cool with Rue again. She's the lead of the show. There's no denying that. It's a stacked ensemble. I love the cast of characters, but Rue has always been the lead. But again, when Rue was the lead, we would catch up with her at school, and it was very easy to follow all of the characters because they were all in the same place for most of the show. But this show is having a hard time because it's trying to balance all these characters who are in completely different situations in different places. Some are in LA, some are in other places, and they're having to catch up. And some characters are going to feel not as used, right? Like, even though this was like Maddie's episode, she's really not in the episode that much. Lexi, right, was not in this episode. And Lexi's one of my favorite characters. Jules was not in last week's episode. So I am worried they don't have enough time to get and give fair enough screen time, right, to everyone's favorite characters. So I still thought this was like like solid episode. There were glimpses for me of peak Euphoria, but again, Labyrinth's music not being in the show continues to be an issue. The look of the show and the Wild West interpretation of like today's Los Angeles, Hollywood does not work for me. And some of these situations are a bit too ridiculous and over the top. Do I still think this is a really good show? I do. I don't think this is like an awful show. But do I believe this has been a drastic drop off between one and two and three? Yes, so far. But again, the season isn't over yet. I have hope that the wedding episode in particular could reach the heights that was the first two seasons of Euphoria. So I'm still hopeful we can get to that, but I am more nervous than I was heading into the season. So what are you guys' thoughts on this new episode of Euphoria? Let me know down in the comments. Like this video, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you guys in another video very soon.